Welcome to the Zero Trust Journey podcast, created by cybersecurity practitioners for those walking the same path. We share real stories, hard lessons, and hard-won victories from the field, so you can sidestep the pitfalls and deliver the wins. Grab your coffee, tune out the buzzwords, and let's get into the real story right here on the Zero Trust Journey podcast.
Welcome back to the Zero Trust Journey. Today, we are joined by fantastic guest, Selena Stewart. Are you, by any chance, related with Martha Stewart?
I am not. I wish I were.
I'm sure you get this a lot. Selena is currently the Director of Cyber and AI Risk Management at Nuvik. Prior to Nuvik, she had worked at McKinsey, fantastic, where she managed cross-functional teams of analysts, data scientists, and technical expertise for Fortune 500 clients. She's recognized thought leader in the risk associated with generative AI, artificial intelligence, and generative adversarial networks, GAN. Selena, welcome to the show. I want to talk a lot about GANs actually today, so we'll jump right into it.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
On this podcast, we frequently discuss how attackers are no longer breaking in, they're logging in. I'm sure you've seen the memes. Identity is the new perimeter. With your research around GANs and AI, with attackers leveraging the adversarial networks to potentially spoof biometric authentication or automate credential attacks, how does this disrupt our current assumption of identity as a new perimeter if AI can flawlessly mimic a Victor or Selena? How must our continuous verification strategies evolve to keep up?
It's a great question. And one of the things that we're seeing is that number one, to your point, attackers are leveraging this in so many different ways. So we've seen things from deepfake videos. So for example, I didn't do my diligence. I didn't verify that you are who you say you were. This could be an attacker, right? Taking advantage of this setting. So that's one, is we're seeing a lot of video attacks. Similarly, we're seeing a lot of voice-based attacks as well. So things like attackers who are mimicking voice. So let's say you get an urgent call from your CISO who says, hey, you're working in our SOC. We need you to really quickly disable X, Y, and Z because someone needs access to whatever it may be. As long as it's something that seems legitimate enough, all of our voices are out there. Again, we're speaking, we're using certain terms that could be leveraged easily. And it's really easy for those attackers to use that. And to your point, one of the things that I focus most on is insider threat. And so think about the fact that, again, we're using all of these different AI tools. So we're recording voice on all sorts of Teams meetings. You could be recording, even if you're a malicious insider, a legitimate request from your CISO, from your CEO, from whoever it is that you have access to. Again, if you want to leverage those, you can very easily get around all sorts of different monitoring pieces. And then again, let's say that gets leaked, a malicious attacker outside the organization can also leverage that. And to your point, we really need to be thinking about and starting to build out, number one, training to make sure that users are aware that, hey, the person on the other side of the video, on the other side of the phone call, whoever it may be, that person may not be who you think they are. And in fact, may not be a real human entity at all. Number two, we really need to make sure that companies are adopting the right technologies to actually block this. And to your point, I think number one, first and foremost, is make sure that from an identity perspective, you're doing your diligence. And so a lot of, frankly, it's funny, I talk all the time in boardrooms and in very tactical conversations. And a lot of this comes back to the same security hygiene. You have to be doing access control reviews, making sure that you're periodically checking to make sure that the right people have access to the right things. Again, doing training and making sure that you validate who has access. For example, let's say you're using AI to baseline certain technologies, making sure that those people are trained appropriately and that you know who they are. We're starting to see a lot of agents in use. And so that's where the continuous trust is really going to be very important. And that's something that I think I was just attending the RSA conference out here in San Francisco earlier this week. And I think some companies are starting to build in that space. But I think honestly, it's going to come down to consistent authentication and consistent authorization, both for humans and then for any agents tied to those human identities as well.
As part of my research, I talked to a lot of people around this as well. So I have seen a common theme. Yes, you and I, we are recording, our voices and videos are out there. I know a lot of the personalities in this space whose videos and audios are out there. But there is, I would say, 60 to 80% people, their voices and videos are not out there. And they feel that, do I need to care? Because using AI, you can't clone my voice. Using AI, you can't clone my video. So that's one. And I'll put the second part of my research which is it always boils down to end user, either at work or at home. We started decades ago, okay, the password is 2003, I think, when we started saying that passwords must be secure or longer. All right, we started going through that now. Instead of just putting 1234 or putting your favorite cat's name, you started putting some little bit complicated passwords. Then we said password manager, always password manager. Then we said passkeys. So that's my pretty much personal life. At work, security awareness trainings, phishing training. So I feel like the end user always gets the tail end of all these. Well, now I have to worry about this as well. Generative AI. Well, if my boss is calling me, I need to validate. To your point, I need to validate if I am Victor who's talking to you today. So I feel like it's the end user who always have to bear the burden on top of what they're supposed to do.
I think that's a fair point. It's interesting too, because, and we obviously don't have time to get into corporate responsibility and all of those pieces, right? But it's a really interesting point. And I always take the risk lens, right? That's what I'm trained in. That's really what the focus of my work is on. And it's interesting from a corporate risk perspective, we always talk about impact. So let's say fines, potential penalties,
Right.
obviously lost consumer trust, things like that. It's interesting. I think the impetus is on the users because of the way that corporate risk ultimately trickles down, right? So let's say a large healthcare company gets breached, your healthcare records are out there, large financial institution gets breached, and then your, again, financial records, credit information, whatever is out there. It then becomes on the user, right? That end user who has to file with creditor monitoring, has to make sure that they have identity theft protection on. And of course, now with AI, another interesting piece that we probably don't have time to talk about is the creation of synthetic identities. And so people are just having all of that data put together, and AI is generating new individuals who are tied to what should be your own personal data.
But let me go back to the question where it's, if my audio and video is not out there, do I need to be worried?
Well, and that's where I was going to go with this, is I think a lot of folks don't realize how much audio and video actually may be out there that they did not intend to be out there, right?
They just don't know about it.
Exactly. Well, and I'm even thinking, for example, at the doctor's office recently, they've started asking, can I use an AI note taker to help me transcribe my notes? That note taker is listening. It's taking in my voice. It's listening to me describe my symptoms. That's a use case many folks may not be thinking about. Similar when I go to authenticate at my bank, and I won't say the passphrase that they want, right? But there's a certain piece where maybe my voice is being used to help authenticate to my specific bank account.
Right.
I think there's a lot of these instances, even customer success, customer relationships, right? Anything where you're calling in and someone is able to potentially record and you give that kind of validation, that's a use case you may not be thinking of.
Fair point.
So I would caution people, even if you don't think you have an online presence, you do in some way. And so unfortunately, from a corporate responsibility perspective, that doesn't quite trickle down. You still need to be thinking about these things and at least being proactive, right? There's not much we can do as end users to mitigate it, which is probably where you're taking this, but
just be aware
it is
of
one
it,
of those
I think.
just to be aware of. Exactly.
Yeah, aware of it. I think, so my family thinks that I am an IT guy and I fix printers.
Right.
And every time they get into some sort of scam or things that they hear from the news, they're like, hey, what about this? And I always tell them, you cannot control or stop every bad thing happening. The best thing you can do is be aware of your identity, be aware of your crown jewels, in this case, your bank accounts, maybe your social security, maybe your ID. Just be aware of that. To your point, monitoring. Put a monitor. If you're not going to buy a house or car anytime soon, freeze your credits. Like you really don't need it. So I know I'm digressing here because it's a favorite topic of mine, but we often talk about the effectiveness gap, Selena. Having the best security tools. You said that you were at RSA. Just because you have the best security tool doesn't mean you're secure, or if you're not even testing them properly. When insider already has legitimate access, they have essentially bypassed the padlock on the door. It is Zero Trust Journey podcast. I must talk about Zero Trust. So when it comes to zero trust architecture, weaponizing AI within the corporate networks, isolating these anomalies, what is the best way for organizations to consider the best architecture to ensure that the adversarial networks and all the MCP servers and all that, it's not part of the core problem where it can really weapon?
It's a great question. And I think To your point, and I'm curious what other companies and what other folks on the podcast are thinking about this as well. But from my research, I think number one is visibility and discoverability. So you simply can't, to your point, zero trust only works, right? If you have that perimeter locked down and if you're
Right.
designing it very purposefully to prevent those lapses in trust. And so you need to know, obviously, what's going into your network. You need to know basically what's happening on there. So first and foremost is just making sure that when you say zero trust, you actually mean zero trust and you have that
Right.
visibility and that discoverability. I think the second one from my perspective comes back to some of those best practices around, to your point, continuous monitoring. So really making sure for anyone who's already bypassed that padlock, to your point, that you know who those folks are. Again, in the rise of agentic AI, this is going to become even more difficult, right? It's really hard to have zero trust when people are throwing around words like continuous trust as it relates to certain agents and certain activities.
Mhm.
And then I think number three is really make sure that, as with everything zero trust, right, one of the big principles is making sure that things aren't changing without your permission, without your visibility. And so I think that's going to be a big piece of this is making sure, hey, if something is configured this way, that configuration is not changing. Any anomalies would be bubbling up there. And that's where some of this insider, for example, training, making sure that you are verifying who has access to these different pieces, that's going to become even more important because, again, some of these tools run baselines even within a zero trust environment. And so if those baselines or those configurations are being treated by AI as normal, even though they're running something malicious, or if those configurations are changing, it's going to be really hard to detect and maintain that zero trust environment.
Fair. Every C-level event or meeting that I've been to lately, all they're asking is, what is an AI security? Based on your research, your conversations, what are you advising our security leaders that they should look into AI security, not a generic term anymore, since it's really not. There are different disciplines of AI security now. What would you advise them to just almost like a pathway or a roadmap that this is how you want to start asking questions for your AI security instead of just asking, tell me about AI security?
It's a great question. I think this is evolving really rapidly. I have to say my answer probably 2 months ago is very different than the answer I'll give
Sure.
today. And so I think number one, again, don't forget first principles and the basics of security hygiene. That's something that I've been saying for quite a while. But I'm only now starting to see folks really start to think about almost like a third party risk management style approach to AI. And when I say third party risk management, obviously it's not just, hey, we're incorporating this vendor into our tech stack, into our environment, into our networks. You really have to be thinking about this from an AI specific lens, right? So be asking about not just the controls on whatever the AI, tool, widget, whatever it might be. Go several layers deeper. Again, some of the things we're seeing now, AI obviously is not just being used to accelerate certain workflows. It's developing the code for you. It's actually building out whatever that business case may be and generating data, processing customer data, all of those different pieces. So you really need to be asking questions, not just about how secure is the tool or the widget, but go to the level of what is the LLM susceptible to? Have you tried it for memory injection, prompt injection, all sorts of different pieces. Again, we don't have time, but one of the most interesting talks I saw at RSA this past week was about tokenization. And so very basic changes. Let's say you say, hey, AI agent, process instructions. If somebody puts something in front of the instructions, maybe an F, so that it can parse to be fin and issions and ions,
Right.
things like that, right? So make sure as you're doing that third party risk management, you're getting to that level where you really understand what's susceptible to. I think second would be very thoughtful about, to your point about zero trust, where in the security stack you are embedding AI, since pretty much every vendor, again, as I'm sure you're seeing in the market, everyone is incorporating AI. And so it's not
Yeah.
just an insider risk, right? It's also, again, if the AI itself is susceptible to different pieces, if it's going to be operating perhaps autonomously with very little human in the loop, you really need to understand where those pieces are going to be and maintain that discoverability.
Fair.
And then last, I think, is just the monitoring. And that gets back to, again, security hygiene, making sure you have the telemetry so that as AI adjusts and as it becomes even more important in the workflow, you can understand what it's doing, what its outputs are, and maintain that level of visibility.
So I'll share something here. I talked about 17 different security leaders, and as part of that conversation was AI security, and I continued asking some more questions. This was just part of my research. First was always AI security, but all they want to know that my company is using one or the other form of LLM. that's AI security to them. So that's first level, that if your company is using LLM, commercial LLM, not your own, so that's AI security to you. If that's the one, then again, there are products and a solution out there. Second is you're developing your own bot or chat bot or your own, or you have made an enterprise agreement with one of the known LLM companies and you're consuming that, but just for your own company and all the data models are just for you. Third type is where you are actually developing AI for your consumers, your customers. So that's where the AI security, not just what you're consuming from LLM, but actually offering AI for your customers. So now the AI security is different because now people are going to do prompt injection and all that, what you just said. Fourth one is AI access, which means all the tools now. So now the identity perimeter agents, they are assuming your identity, right? So if that's the case, AI access, which AI tool is accessing what, assuming what identity and how. So that's becoming a new part of AI security. Again, I just wanted to itemize AI security to a level where when someone says AI security, I just want to almost give them a menu card, like in a restaurant. Pick 135, 137, 235. Pick what you mean by AI security, because then you can really understand what that means. And the last one is obviously actually developing your own models, developing your own things internally, and you want to secure them because that's your intellectual property. That's going to do things for you only. You're not exposing to anyone. Almost like a recipe back to Coca-Cola versus Pepsi, right? You built your own thing. You're securing it, storing it in a software. Now AI is the next wave of that software, if you will.
Absolutely. I really like that breakdown. And it's interesting you mentioned that too, because I think the reason I answered the way I did is I see so many corporations conflating many of those, right? And so I really love that menu style. And I think it's a really nice logical way for listeners to think about, okay, as I'm perhaps building this, acquiring this, adding on to something maybe that's a commercial tool. I love that perspective because it just structures it so nicely and it helps to maintain that airtight. I know you come from a zero trust background, so that airtight kind of zero trust perspective on it. So I think that's a really smart way of classifying it.
And we don't want our listeners and audience to be misleading by the vendors and companies as well. On the name of AI security, all they have is just yet another box saying that we're using AI under the hood. It's machine learning or algorithms they're doing. But what are you doing on the name of AI security? Executives, we want to give them some sort of easy way of asking these questions. Hence, I did the research for 17 security leaders that I knew that when you are asking your vendors AI security, what do you really mean by that? What are they giving you information that can give you a comfort that, okay, we have somewhat AI security? How would you quantify that AI security? So I really wanted to dig deep into it, but I just got to the surface level of that menu style. My research is going to continue, so we'll know more.
That's fantastic. I'm excited to learn more once you publish it.
Selena, thanks so much. At the end, is there one advice that you can give to our listeners, especially who want to learn more about GAN, especially adversarial networks, and how the weaponization happens? One advice you can give them that it gives them the comfort and knowing that they are doing things right or they should do things right.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think my high level would be always coming back again to the risk perspective. Think about what your assets are and really be sure that as you're evaluating AI, and especially from a GAN perspective, that you're number one, maintaining that visibility, training folks effectively, and then really thinking about how you're using AI to avoid giving it access to those crown jewels. So I think GAN will only continue to develop. And so being able to distinguish whether or not it's an AI person on the other side of the line or other side of the video, or even within the networks as an insider, I think will be critically important. So more to come, but I think maintaining the visibility and doing your diligence now will get you quite a long way.
Selena, thanks so much. I know you have been a featured speaker at all the high profile events, like I was looking at Security Week's AI Risk Summit, CloudX, Blue Team Con, and Hack Red Team Con or Red Con, something like that.
Hack Red Con, yes.
Yeah, which was interesting. Blue team and red team. I was really interested that you were able to provide both sides of the perspective. So thanks so much for being on the show and providing your AI ethics and governance and all the research you have been doing.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me and appreciate all the listeners for tuning in. So thank you.
That's a wrap on this Zero Trust journey. Now it's your turn. Step into the spotlight, share your story, and be part of the journey. Subscribe to Zero Trust Journey on LinkedIn for the latest news, events, and giveaways. Until next time.